First, I'd like to apologize for being late. We had some technical difficulties. We couldn't get the live stream going. So please, sorry about that. So today, let me share a document that has the, what we're going to cover today. Okay, so I hope everyone can see this. Let me ask Mizuho, can you see this document?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is Tozen Daigaku Shakai Hokken Health and Pension Scheme. I'm Louis Carlett. Today we're supposed to start at 2 o'clock. It's 2:21. Sorry about we had technical difficulties. So today we're going to talk about the health and pension scheme in Japan. It's a public scheme, and we're going to go over first of all the difference between Shakai Hokken and Rodo Hokken. That's basically social insurance versus labor insurance, and they get confused a little bit. So we're going to talk about that. Also, we're going to talk about the difference between Shakai Hokken system versus Kokumin health and pension system. They're both public systems, but one is for regular employees and one is for those who are not employees. Then we're going to talk about the cost and benefits of Shakai Hokken, so you get a good idea of whether it's good for you to be in it. We're going to talk about Shakai Hokken eligibility for enrollment and also eligibility for benefits. Then we're going to talk about pension house, and that's a 3-story house that explains how the benefits, pension benefits work in Japan after retirement. Then we're going to take questions and answers, and I'll try to save time as much as possible. Okay. Okay, let's see. So the Shakai Hokken Health and Pension Scheme. Okay, there's 3 parts to the Shakai Hokken Health and Pension Scheme. They're broken down into healthcare, pension, and long-term care. Now, the first part of that is called Kenko Hokken. Now, it sounds like it just means health insurance, but one thing you should be careful of is that it's actually a proper noun. Kenko Hokken is the name of the system. So that's the health portion. The pension portion is called Kosei Nenkin Hokken. And then the third section is Kaigo Hokken. And these are a set. You can't enter into these separately. They come as a set for employees, particularly regular employees. And it's a whole package. Okay, now this also includes maternity leave allowance, what I call the 6 and 8 maternity leave allowance, which covers 6 weeks before birth and 8 weeks after. And basically the eligibility for this system, Shakai Hokken system, is that you're, first of all, that you have or are expected to work 3 months or more at the same employer. And your work hours per week are greater to or equal to 3/4 of an ordinary worker. Now, it's not clear what ordinary worker means, and that's something that there's a lot of dispute over, but that's what how the law describes it. Okay, so that's basically the whole system. And again, it's a set for regular employees, and you pay a premium every month, and then if you go to the doctor, you get certain benefits. After you retire, there are certain benefits. Okay. Now I'd like to go to the Rodo Hokken labor insurance program. Now there's 2 parts to this. The one part is Rodo Saigai Hokken. This is often called ROSAI. This is workplace accident insurance. So if you trip over something and break your foot, then you should be covered for this Rodo Saigai, this ROSAI insurance. They will, it'll pay your bills and it'll pay a good portion of your wages lost during the time you're out because of the injury. So during that time also, your employer cannot fire you while you're under the system, and also for 1 month after you come back. Now, the Rosai, technically there's two parts. One is Gyomu Saigai and the other is Tsukin Saigai. Gyomu Saigai is for accidents that take place while you're on duty, while you're at work, in the workplace or during your work day, even if you're outside the workplace. The other part is Tsukin Saigai, which is commute insurance. And that's if you have an accident, let's say you're riding your bike to work and you fall and you break your wrist. That would be covered under Tsukin Saigai. And there's certain rules about whether you're covered or not. But generally, if you're on your way to work or on your way back from work, you should be covered by the system. Now, Rosai is for all workers. Employers must put their employees in the Rosai system, and the employer pays the entire portion of the premium. The employee doesn't pay anything. Now, one thing you should be careful is for if you're under a system called Gyomitaka, if you have a contract that looks like a service provider, like you're a private service provider like Uber or GABA. So under this system, you're not covered by Rosai. So that's something to keep in mind. This is for all employees. The other part of Rodo Hokken is what's called Koyo Hokken. And this is employment insurance, or we often say unemployment insurance. This is like if you're working and then you lose your job for whatever reason, you can get benefits covering a certain amount of your wages while you're out looking for work. Now, the premise is that you're looking for work, and the period of time which you can receive it depends on how long you were enrolled, how old you are, and a couple other things. Now, this premium is split between the employer and the employee, but it's not an equal 50-50 split. It's 0.6% is paid by the employer and 0.3% is paid by the employee. So the total of 0.9% premium. And of that 0.9%, the employer pays 2/3, the employee pays 1/3. Now, this is a great system. It's really cheap. The premium doesn't cost much, especially for the employee. And yet the benefits are real. And if you lose your job, it really does help while you're looking for the next job. Okay, now who's eligible to get into the system is if you work 31 days or more at the same employer and your weekly hours are greater than or equal to 20, then you're eligible. Not just eligible, your employer must enroll you and then pay the premium as stipulated. And then they can deduct 0.3% from your salary each month. Okay, so again, Rodo Hokken is different from Shakai Hokken. Now, this Koyo Hokken, unemployment insurance, often is considered part of Shakai Hokken, but technically it's not. And it's important to distinguish that. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me get some water. My mouth is dry. Okay, Shakai Hokken versus Kokumin Health and Pension System. Okay, so if you're employed basically as a full-time worker at most workplaces in Japan, your employer must put you in Shakai Hokken. And now here, the premiums are paid 50-50, and the premiums are much higher, close to about 12% of your salary for each of the 50-50. So total of about 24% of your salary, but management pays half and the worker pays half. And it's much more expensive, but there's a lot of benefits to it, and I'll talk about that later. Now, those who are not in Shakai Hokken, if you're a resident of Japan, you must be in the other two systems. This is called Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kokumin Nenkin Hokken. Now these, unlike Shakai Hokken, which is a set, Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kokumin Nenkin Hokken are not a set. They're separate. And let me write in these things here. So I only put it in kanji. So Kokumin Kenko Hokken and So again, these are separate systems. You have to go, your employer will not put you in this. You must go to your yakusho, your local city office, and enter into these two systems. Now, also the employer pays none of the premium. This is completely up to the resident to pay the full premium. So it's much more expensive if you total them both, and the benefits are far less. But by law, you must be in either Shakai Hokken or these other two systems, as long as you're a resident in Japan. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind. So these are mutually exclusive systems. You shouldn't be in both. You have to either in Shakai Hokken or in the other two kokumin systems. And these are both public systems controlled by the government, of course. Okay, Shakai Hokken is for those who work 3/4 or more of the work hours per week of an ordinary worker. Okay, so it doesn't say what an ordinary worker is in the laws that cover this. It just says ordinary worker. Now, this is often interpreted as an ordinary worker is someone who works 40 hours, but it doesn't say that. And an ordinary worker certainly could be much less than 40 hours. But if you consider 40 hours to be the work hours of an ordinary worker, then 3/4, of course, is 30 hours. So if you work 30 hours or more, and you definitely are in this system, because the maximum ordinary work hours is 40 hours. More than 40 hours a week you cannot have a contract that's more than 40 hours per week. That's the legal limit for most jobs. There's a tiny exception, but we won't go into that now. And also when it says ordinary worker, it's an ordinary worker in that job type at that company or at that employer. It's not like an ordinary worker out in society. So you can only, if nobody works 40 hours at your company, then 40 hours cannot be the basis, cannot be the denominator for the 3/4 calculation. Now, recently, a couple years back, they did expand this system to cover those who work 20 hours or more at large companies. And large companies are defined as those with more than 500 employees. And when they say employees, they mean already eligible employees. So if you have 520 employees who are already in Shakai Hokken, then anyone who's 20 hours or more, anyone who works 20 hours or more per week is also eligible and must be enrolled. Okay, so what are the benefits of Shakai Hokken? What does it give you? First of all, it covers 70% of your medical bills and more in some cases. It provides you 2/3 of your lost wages when you're out sick more than 3 days. And this system is called Shobyo Tate. You can see it here, I think. You can see here, Shobyo Tate. So this is a great system. If you're in Kokumin Kenko Hokken, there's nothing covering lost wages. You're basically on your own because it assumes you don't work. So the Shobyo Tate will cover 2/3 of your lost wage if you're out sick more than 3 days. And that doesn't matter who caused the sickness. So even if your employer has nothing to do with it, you get a cold, you get pneumonia, or in these days, of course, if you come down with corona, it'll cover 2/3 of your lost wages while you're out, up to 18 months. Okay, it also provides 2/3 of your wages during maternity leave. So if you give birth, and I call it the 6 and 8 maternity leave, 6 and 8 Shusan Tatekin. Now, the reason I say 6 and 8, because it covers it from 6 weeks before your planned birth and 8 weeks after. So you get a total of 14 weeks. 2/3 of your wages are covered, assuming your employer doesn't pay your wages. If your employer pays your wages, you don't get this as extra money. Also, if you give birth, you get a 420,000 yen one-time childbirth allowance, Shusan Ichijikin. So of course, that's a good thing for new mothers they have a new child in the family, and there's a lot of costs associated with that. So So these are some of the benefits. Now that's just the health coverage. Of course, it also provides pension, old age pension and disability pension. And of course, these are very important things. And I'll get to how the pension is structured, because the Kokumi Nenkin also provides pension. But if you're in Shakai Hokken, you get much more pension benefit in your old age. So I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, let me get some more water. Okay, so by contrast, the Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kosei Nenkin Hokken national pension and health scheme for non-employees doesn't provide as much of a benefit as the Shakai Hokken. It does cover 70% of medical bills, just like the other one. I should say, it does not provide, normally it does not provide the 2/3 shobyo tate lost wages in normal times. In normal times, the Shakai Hokken does, but the Kokumin Kenko Hokken does not. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it will cover 2/3 of your shobyo tate lost wages as a special provision, even just being in Kokumin Kenko Hokken. But normally it does not. So normally that's a big difference in how good the systems are. Okay, and then the Kokumi Nenkin, of course, provides a pension, sorry about that, but much less generous pension than the Shakai Hokken. Okay, so let me go to the next frame. Oh, wait a minute, where's the next frame? Here it is. Okay, so now I want to talk about the pension. Okay, the pension is, I call this the pension house. And in Japanese too, they call it Nenkin no Sankai Tate, or sometimes Nenkin Nikai Tate. And what it is there's a house that will describe the structure of benefits for your old age pension. Okay, so first of all, at the bottom is Kokumi Nenkin. So if you're in Kokumi Nenkin, you will get this pension, which is not so much. It's actually pretty slight, the amount you get per month. Now, however, if you're in Shakai Hokken, or for all the years and months that you are in Shakai Hokken, you get the Kokumi Nenkin general pension plus an extra, far more generous portion on top of the Kokumi Nenkin portion. So this is a really good system because you get both. So what this does is give you a benefit, like it incentivizes people working for companies on regular employment. Whether that's good or bad is a different issue. But now on top of both of these, you can also get private insurance to cover, like for instance, the 30% that you normally pay, which can be a lot if it's very serious illness. There's certain other things that it can cover. So this is something that you put on top of the other things. But for most Japanese, just the first two is very beneficial in terms of health insurance and fairly reasonable in terms of pension, although there's a lot of complaints and there's a lot of concerns that maybe the system will collapse because we won't have enough money in it. So I think it's important to remember pension house and how it is structured. Kosei Nenkin is not a replacement benefit. It's given to you on top of the Kokumi Nenkin benefit. Okay, now I'm going to, let me just leave it there for a second. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay, so let's talk about the benefits and cost. So the Shakai Hokken system, the health and pension and nursing care. First of all, if you are over 40, you have to pay more for the nursing care premium. The premium is a little bit more because you have to pay into the nursing care. It's still all one set, but it'll get a little more expensive. But even then, it's about 12% of your pay, your portion. Now, management has to pay a minimum of 50%, but they can pay a lot more. In fact, some places pay 75% or 100%, but the minimum management must pay is 50%. So that's 50% of the roughly 24% of your salary. So again, your portion will be about 12% or less if you have a more generous boss. Okay, so it's still pretty expensive, but there are great benefits. It's if you have a health card and you go into a doctor's, it's much easier. You can go to any doctor in the country, any hospital pretty much, and show your card and you get 75% off of the price that, and all the medical prices for drugs and treatment are controlled by the government. There's a system, a point system, and each point is roughly 10 yen. So, and not only do you get a 70% discount, but the price itself is controlled, so it's much less. If you are not in either system, not in Kenko Hokken or Kokumin Kenko Hokken, the hospitals can charge you anything they want. And of course, it's going to be much, much more, sometimes 2 or 3 times as much. So not only do you not get the 70% discount, but also you have to pay a much higher cost to begin with. So it's really, really important that you be in either Kenko Hokken or Kokumin Kenko Hokken. Also, like the point about the wage coverage. Now, if you're just in Kokumin Kenko Hokken, in normal times, you don't get any coverage for wages when you're out sick. However, in Shakai Hokken, you get 2/3 of your wages covered while you're out sick more than 3 days. And it's called Shobyo Teate. And it's a pretty good system. You just apply for it. And your, I covered it a little bit earlier. Your employer cooperates and helps fills out the form. And then you get your wages covered. So if you're out sick for 2 or 3 months, you have an operation or something like that, you don't have to worry about your income going down to 0 while you're out. So that's obviously a clear benefit. And then, of course, the pension, if you're in Shakai Hokken, you have a much better pension. Like I said about pension house. Now, also, if you're a foreign passport holder, if you're a foreigner in Japan, you also can get what's called Dattai Ichijikin. This is a one-time lump sum payment. If you leave Japan, if you give up your permanent residency and totally leave Japan, you can apply for and get up to 3 years contributions of the pension portion of the Shakai Hokken. Now, the Shakai Hokken is split between health, pension, and nursing care, but pension makes up about 80% of the premium you're going to be paying every month. So that can be a lot of money over 3 years. Now, if you're in it more than 3 years, you can still only get up to 3 years worth of those pension contributions back. And only if you give up your permanent residency or whatever visa you have at the time and leave the country. But that's also a provision, that's also a benefit that Japanese citizens cannot get even if they leave the country and immigrate somewhere else in the world. So that's one benefit. Also, disability pension. In addition to old age pension, there's disability pension. Shogai Neki, I personally actually get disability pension because of a kidney disease where I lost all kidney function for 14 years before I had a transplant last year. So this is something I know personally, and disability pension is much better if you're in Shakai Hokken. Now, if you're not in either system and you become disabled, you're not eligible for disability pension. But if you're in Shakai Hokken and you become disabled for any reason, you can get the most generous disability pension. It's like a bi-monthly payment that you get. Now, if you're only in Kokumin Nenkin, it's much, much less, just like old age pension. So that's something really important to keep in mind, that the Shakai Hokken is a really important system. And then there's a less tangible benefit to being in Shakai Hokken. Shakai Hokken in Japan is a really fundamental system that most people expect to have, most workers expect to have, and it's also kind of a status. if you're a regular worker, you're going to be in Shakai Hokken, and that's considered a higher status. Even though most workers are in it, it's a higher status than if you're not in Shakai Hokken. If you're not in Shakai Hokken, you're considered you're not as regular a worker, and there's kind of a dismissive attitude and stuff like that. So there's also this status associated with it. I'm not saying that's good, but it's just something that's a reality in Japan. And I think it's also why many foreign workers are not in Shakai Hokken. Many employers, first of all, they want to save the money because it's a big premium for management. It's a huge portion of their labor cost because they're also paying 12% of your salary on top of your salary. Also, I think there's a kind of a sense that foreigners don't deserve to have that status or that benefit. And also there's a sense that foreigners are guest workers, that they're going to go home anyway. What's the point of having them in this system where they're going to retire someday and get a pension, even though of course many foreigners do stay and retire in Japan. So there's a sense that, in fact, the one-time lump sum payment that foreigners are eligible for practically encourages foreigners to go home after 3 years. And I'm sure many of you who are foreigners have experienced the assumption among many Japanese bureaucrats and employers that you will just go home pretty soon and you're not going to stay here and you're not really living here as a member of society. And so there's all this kind of a separation between Japanese and foreigners in many, many aspects of society. And this is yet another one. It used to be that foreigners couldn't even be in the system, but now they're in the system. But there's certainly a trend of employers not feeling obliged to enroll you, if you're a foreigner, into the system. Okay. And also Shakai Hokken benefit is that it provides long-term care. If you're older and disabled or unable to take care of yourself, this system will provide you with nursing care at your home. Okay, and like I said, the eligibility is if you work 3/4 of or more of the hours of an ordinary worker, whatever that means. Okay, and it used to be that there was before 2018, the 3/4 of the ordinary workers was not even in the law. It was in a directive from the pension agency. And so there's a lot of disputes about whether that had whether that was legally valid or had any legal force. And we've been through a lot of disputes over Shakai Hokken enrollment. And many of the local chapters of Tozen Union have demanded Shakai Hokken enrollment for their members. And there's a lot of resistance from employers to enrolling foreigners in Shakai Hokken. In fact, many employers do everything they can to avoid enrolling foreigners. They make the work hours 29.5, and then say 30 is the 3/4 threshold. So you're only 29. You only work 29.5 hours a week, so you're not eligible. We can't put you in. And then also they don't count all the hours to make sure that it stays under 30 hours. So that's something we're fighting for. I personally recommend being in Shakai Hokken because of all the benefits, even though in the short term it seems like a major cost. But because of all the benefits, both in terms of financial help when you need it, whether you're disabled or old or out sick, and also for the becoming a part of society. Shakai Hokken is not just a benefit, it's an obligation, it's a right and a duty, because if people are not in it, they're not supporting the system. And the system is largely, although not completely, self-sustaining. And there's a lot of push from right-wingers in the government and outside to scrap the system in favor of a privatized defined contribution system like in the United States. And I mean, the United States has both, of course, but there's, the 401k. And that's something like whether people want to have private insurance or private pensions on top of the Shakai Hokken system, that's fine, but it's very important that there's this publicly run, not-for-profit system of health insurance and pension. Okay, so I think that's basically a wrap up of all the things we're supposed to cover today. As usual, it goes faster than I thought. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning. So if anyone's out there, I'd like to take questions, and I'll ask Mizuho to help me if there's any questions. Mizuho, are you there?
Mizuho's stepped away for a second, so I'm here.
Okay.
We've got one question so far, it seems. Could you explain the situation with dependents, Kokumin Hokken?
Okay. Yeah. Kokumin Hokken, Kokumin Kenko Hokken, or Shakai Hokken?
For Kokumin Hokken, I think.
Kokumin Kenko or Nenkin? Oh, is someone asking the question? Well, okay.
Yeah,
so yeah, for Shakai Hokken or the others, you can be a dependent. Like let's say let's say you work, but your husband doesn't work, right? Or your husband works less than, I forget there's a maximum that they can earn. It's like 1 point something million yen a year. I'm sorry, I don't have the number on me right now, but there's a max. If let's say your husband works, but not so much income per year, or also you have children, so they can become dependents on your system if you're in Shakai Hokken. So that's another benefit of Shakai Hokken, or the other systems too. But again, it's much more if you're in Shakai Hokken. So it's called Hifuyosha. So Hifuyosha is the one who's dependent. Now, if they make more than that amount, then they have to have their own, be in the program themselves. So they can't be dependent if they make more than that maximum of 1.2 or 1.4. I'm sorry, I don't remember the number. So I hope that answered the question.
But what about Kokumin Hokken? You just said Shakai
Hokken. So it's roughly the same, but it's less. It's less coverage, less benefit. Actually, I'm not exactly sure about this, so I'm going to have to. I guess I can look it up right now. Are there other questions right now?
Yes, there's another one.
Okay, and let me look up real quick to make sure.
Yes.
I don't want to say the wrong thing here.
Or a point that's been raised. There's a myth out there that Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kenko Hokken don't cover psychiatric care. Could you address any limitations on coverage for psychiatric care if they do exist?
As far as I know, there aren't any limitations as far as psychiatric care. I'm pretty sure it's dealt with the same way. Let me look right now let me look up these two questions right now, and I'll do it by sharing the screen if I can do that. Let me see if I can do that. Is that right? Yeah, hold on a second. Okay, let me look up right now. So the limit about psychological care, is that right?
Yeah.
For Kenko Hokken? I don't think there's a limit. I've never heard that, but let me just be sure. Okay, so let me look here. Let me check this out. Okay, here's the Ministry of Labor's page. Yeah, it seems like public healthcare does cover it except for, wait a minute. Okay, it doesn't cover counseling. That's one thing. It also apparently doesn't cover treatment while hospitalized, but it covers normal treatment and yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Oren, I can't hear you. Are you talking to me?
I didn't say anything. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So there are a few things that it doesn't cover, but generally it seems like it does cover, yeah, including Tenkan, which is epilepsy. Oh, I know what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the echo. Okay, what was the other question about, oh, dependency, right?
Yeah, dependence for Kokumin Kenko Hokken.
See what I'm doing on the website here, like Googling? Oren, can you see it?
Yep. Okay, so we've just got more information about it. So,
yeah, maybe it doesn't, there isn't.
For example, if spouse A has Shakai Hokken and spouse B has Kokumin Nenkin, right, are dependents automatically enrolled with spouse A's?
Wait, you broke up a little bit. Say that again, the last part.
Okay, so if spouse A has Shakai Hokken,
right,
and spouse B has Kokumin Nenkin, are dependents automatically enrolled with spouse A's coverage, or would spouse B have to pay the extra?
No. So it's like the Shakai Hokken person, anyone in the family who makes less than that maximum can be a dependent. Yeah, so I think I was wrong. I think it's the dependency is only for Shakai Hokken, and any family member who is a dependent, even if they don't live with the person, can be considered a dependent and benefit from that system. So that's yet another good benefit of Shakai Hokken. Wait a minute, hold a second. They must have residency in Japan, except for certain circumstances if they live overseas. And there's been court cases disputing about when they live overseas.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, here's the maximum for it's 1.3 million, that's it. They must make less than 1.3 million.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I think it is only Shakai Hokken. So I don't have a firm grasp of that. Okay, anything else?
Yes, I think there's a question in Japanese.
Okay.
But I think
I can read. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
知人からの質問です。私の会社では日本人従業員のみ社保加入で、外国人従業員は民間保険に加入しています。理由は多くの外国人はいずれ国に帰るから社保は意味がない。民間の方が安くて保証も手厚い、民間の方が安くて保証も手厚いから本人にとってもいいということでした。本人が納得しているのならそれでもいいような気もしますが、このような異なる取り扱いは問題があるのでしょうか?
Yeah, okay. So you think it's okay to answer in English or should I answer in Japanese?
Could you interpret in English?
Okay, so the question is, somebody said that at my company or at my acquaintance's company, the foreigners and the Japanese are not in the same system. The Japanese are in Shakai Hokken and the foreigners are in a private system, a private health insurance system. And the thinking is that foreigners will go home anyway. This is something I referred to before. So that it's not really appropriate for the, and they don't need it, let's say. And also that the private insurance system is better in terms of benefits, and I think you said cheaper. So is there a problem with this? Okay, yes, there are a lot of problems with this. Okay, first of all, this is an argument that employers love, because employers don't want to pay their half of your Shakai Hokken premium. I mean, of course. And if they can find any way to get out of it, of course they want to. And so a lot of employers and the government too, a lot of government agencies have convinced themselves that Shakai Hokken is not beneficial for foreigners. Now that's wrong in many, many ways. First of all, many foreigners do stay longer in Japan, and many for their whole lives, many permanently. And in fact, some Japanese immigrate outwards. That's one thing. Secondly, even if foreigners leave the country, if they, one thing I forgot to say is that to be eligible for benefits, you have to be enrolled in Shakai Hokken for 10 years. That's to get old age pension. So even if foreigners leave, if they're in 10 years and then leave the country, they're still eligible for the pension benefits, even though they live abroad, just like Japanese are. So there's one thing. First of all, many foreigners stay in Japan and could be enrolled more than 10 years. That's one thing. Secondly, the fact that they are not in Shakai Hokken, in effect, encourages them to leave because they don't have a future, because they're not seen as having a future. Again, there's this guest worker mentality. Foreigners are not real members of society. They're just guests who are here temporarily, experience Japan and then go back with fond memories. Now, I'm sure there are people like that, and there are foreigners like that. However, it's not true for all foreigners. Many, many foreigners, in fact, many in Tozen Union, have families in Japan, their lives are here in Japan, and they want to be a part of Japanese society. So not enrolling them in the system is part of the way that Japanese society polarizes foreigners and Japanese. There's many, many parts and aspects of the system in Japan, especially at the workplace, that separates Japanese and foreigners into separate categories. It's very convenient for employers to have the employees divided, the old divide and conquer. So it's very hard for foreigners and Japanese to unite, to unionize, to fight for better conditions if they're in completely different groups. And it's very difficult for foreigners to feel that they're part of Japanese society when they're constantly told, you're different, you're different, you're different. Also, even if foreigners don't get old age pension, as I said before, there's a system for dattai ichijikin, which is one-time lump sum payment that they can get up to 3 years of their pension contributions back. So even in that sense, even if they're only here for 3 or 4 years, a lot of they get back now rather than in their old age. So there's many ways that it's actually a very good system, even for foreigners. And many Tozen Union chapters, locals, have demanded that they get into Shakai Hokken, just like their Japanese colleagues. And there's, like I said, Shakai Hokken is not just a benefit, it's an obligation to put into the system so that, there can be collective taking care of each other, both in terms of health, care, and pension. Now, as far as private insurance goes, we hear a lot that, there's the private insurance is really good system and like that. However, in reality, often it's travel insurance. So again, the idea is that foreigners are just traveling as guests. And it's really a bizarre thing because they're not really traveling. Those who are in that system are not travelers at all. They're residing in Japan. These are people who live in Japan, and they're given travel insurance, which on the one hand, it covers 100%, but it doesn't cover everything. And it's not one of the public systems. So it's not recognized as easily in hospitals, and hospitals are often very hesitant to treat people who are not in one of the public systems. And then, of course, they're also resistant to treating foreigners. And we experienced a real scandal where we had one member last year who we went to many different hospitals and they actually refused treatment, which is actually illegal. And he was having a real difficulty getting around because of his illness. And yet he had to go to several different hospitals. So there's already resistance to treating foreign patients, especially if they're not in the public system. And even if they are in a private system. And then yet, if they're in the private system, there's a resistance because unlike, let's say in the United States, Japanese people usually don't go into a hospital and say, oh, here's my private insurance card or here's my private insurance company. They usually just have what's called a Hokken. It's a little card. I usually have it, I don't have it right now, but so that's one thing. So we strongly discourage segregating foreigners from Japanese. If whatever the standard is, it should be the same regardless of your nationality. Labor law is built, one of the principles upon which labor law is built is equality for foreigners and Japanese. Don't treat foreigners like guest workers. Treat them the same regardless of gender or nationality. I hope that answered the question. Okay, Mizuho, any other questions?
Yeah, it's in English. So, Oren, could you read it?
Yeah, sure. So the newest question we've got is, assume as a freelancer, you apply at the city office for the Kokumin system.
Mm-hmm.
How do you declare your final annualized salary amount from multiple employers/gigs?
I mean, to calculate what your premium will be? Is that
Yeah.
that's the intent of the question, I assume, right?
Yeah, just how do you declare like what you've made, I think.
Well, the Kokumin Kenko Hokken system and Kokumin Nenkin is based on the previous year's salary. It's like for Shakai Hokken, it's based on your April, May, June salary. I don't know why, but so whatever your April, May, June salary was, is based on that. The Kokumin system is based on the previous year's salary. So you take all your, because it's not connected to the employer, Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kokumin Nenkin Hokken are something is between the individual and the government, the local government. So
sorry, could you repeat what you just said? You kind of froze a bit.
Okay. So the Shakai Hokken system, the way they calculate the premium is based on your April, May, June salary. And Shakai Hokken is between you, the individual, the employer, and the government. The employer pays the government, and then they ask you for your half. The Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kokumin Nenkin Hokken, that's between you and the government, local government in this case. And it's based on your previous year's total salary, whether it's freelance or employment. You add up all the salary, and you can get this in your each place that pays you, even if it's freelance work. They're supposed to give you a Gensen Choshu Hyo. What that is year-end tax adjustment ticket, like a form, and it's like this big. I don't know if you can see that. I should have an example here. Anyway, so you get one from everyone who paid you in the previous year, and you add them all together, and that becomes the basis of, first of all, your residence tax, and then your residence tax is also the basis for your Kokumin Kenko Hokken and Kokumin Nenkin Hokken. Hope that answered the question. Mizuho or Oren?
No more questions.
No more questions? Okay. So I guess that's it. I hope I answered all the questions. And next week, we're going to talk about, it'll be me again next week. We're going to talk about the aid programs. It's Tozen Daigaku. Mizuho, do you remember the name of, we called it? It's next Sunday at 2 p.m.
Okay,
And we'll try to work.
I'm not sure, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we're talking about all the aid programs associated with the current corona pandemic. And there are a few that we should go over in detail. There's a lot of confusion about them. And we're going to try to sort it all out next week. So please tune in next week at 2 p.m. and we'll see you there. Okay, so the question is, what about if you are enrolled in a pension system in your country, in a different country from Japan? Okay, so there are many universalization treaties, I think about a dozen or so different countries around the world. And these, depending on the treaty, there are some, like, in other words, like for the UK, if you are dispatched from a UK company to Japan, you can opt out of the Japanese pension system. But different countries have different treaties. They're called, I think they're called universalization treaties. And they're actually really complicated and really specific. So you have to, whatever country you're from, you have to really look at the details of all these treaties. And the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare has the terms of each of the country's treaties, the treaties with each of these different countries. So I would encourage people to look up those treaties. And I don't understand all the treaties. You know, I know a little bit about the UK one, but not the others. And all I can say is it's not that simple that if you're in your own country's system that you can opt out. It's not that simple. And most countries, there's no treaty with Japan. So hopefully that answers the question.